Good evening from the European Parliament here in Brussels. It's been a very busy week as world leaders descended into town for several high-level summits. Plus, we had an exclusive interview with the Russian Prime Minister in Moscow. All of that and all of the highlights coming your way in case you missed it. As the EU Council summit wraps up, it appears that the only thing both sides were able to achieve when it came to Brexit was disappointment. Well, Theresa May reportedly offered no new ideas in her speech last night, and the remaining 27 leaders wrapped up the following debate unusually early. All right, well, let's cross over now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. With all the latest updates, you're joining us, Darren, from the European Council headquarters. Give us the latest as the summit wraps pretty early.
Yeah, well, as you said, this EU Council meeting, or the initial part of it at least, is wrapping up. And we've heard from the German Chancellor Angela Merkel this afternoon, in which she, I think, kind of sums up actually how the EU Council went in regards to Brexit. She said that she left last night's dinner neither more pessimistic nor more optimistic. And I think in many regards that does sum up the mood of this EU Council meeting. Not least of all because, yes, you're right, there has been no substantive progress. That was the conclusion of the EU 27 last night. No new ideas from Theresa May, but everyone is committed to carrying on negotiating on the issue of Brexit. Now, there is potentially a little bit of progress this afternoon that could be quite significant. That is that the European Union, suggestions from Irish sources, could be open to this so-called backstop, which is meant to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland, and at the moment is only meant to apply to Northern Ireland, could be UK-wide. Now, that could be a benefit or a win for Theresa May in these negotiations, though it is possible it'll not be received back in Britain by many as a win. So let's get the view on this and many others with Ben Glaze. He's the deputy political editor of the Mirror newspaper in the UK. First of all, if this is true that Theresa May has been able to get some type of guarantee on a UK-wide backstop, how much of a win is that for her? And how is it like to be received?
It would be a minor victory. This summit had been set up as a crucial moment. There was a lot of pressure on leaders, and particularly Theresa May, to come here and get some sort of an agreement. You know, the damp squib that we all feared this might turn into, it largely has. If she does get something out of the Irish, being able to take that back to the UK, she's got something to show when she addresses the House of Commons on Monday. A little bit of progress, but it's not really yet unlocked the talks. It's not broken that deadlock that's been so crucial, which has overshadowed the last few summits, really.
One of the things we also learned today, apparently, is that May is willing to extend the transition period. But again, that's gone down a bit like a cup of cold sick in London with Brexiteers.
It's the worst thing in the world she could have done, really. She's fighting on several fronts back home. The Remainers feel she's given too much away, and also trying to deny them the meaningful vote when there is a vote on any deal. But the Brexiteers, they're up in arms about this. It ties Britain, shackles Britain to Brussels for up to a year longer. Now, sources are telling us it might only be a few months, and the indication is that Britain needed to show some sort of compromise from its side. But so far it's not been enough, and it really does place her in an unenviable position amongst the hard right of the Conservatives and the DUP as well, on whose vote she relies in the Commons.
All right, I will go first to you, Sajid, being our British MEP here. I mean, was Theresa May, she was here physically, but was she actually talking to her audience back home?
I think both, and she had a very delicate balancing act to carry out. She had to, of course, engage with the negotiating counterparts as well as fellow EU leaders, but at the same time, she has a very tough ask of keeping her party united behind her, which isn't, and trying to gain some sort of compromise within the House of Commons that doesn't exist at the moment either.
All right, before we continue that discussion, I would like to bring in a soundbite from Theresa May herself and the Lithuanian leader. Let's hear it.
I believe everybody around the table wants to get a deal. By working intensively and closely, I believe a deal is achievable, and now is the time to make it happen.
Today, we do not know what they want. They do not know themselves what they really want. That's a problem. We took steps. We need to know what another side wants finally. It is still a great secret.
Well, there you go, Pauline. Theresa May being a little bit optimistic there, and you have the Lithuanian leader saying, well, actually, we don't know what they want. So what's your reading?
Well, on the EU side, it's very clear that they want to work with the Brits. They want to find a deal. They're very clear on that. But they've also been saying quite clearly that there hasn't been any progress, and therefore, I mean, the Lithuanian president is just saying it a bit more obviously, how basically they're waiting for the UK to make a choice, and the UK is not quite sure what it wants.
Is it that? Is it not knowing what they want? I'll put it to you, Peter. Is it not knowing what they want, or should Theresa May come here with what the EU wants, and then we can move forward?
Well, what we are seeing now is a kind of power game. It's like a poker game. Everyone is raising the stakes all the time. I'm not very worried about this. This will end, I think, in a deal. But as all responsible politicians, of course, it's always good to bear in mind also to make plans for possibly a no deal. But I'm quite sure we will see a deal develop in December.
Yeah, Sajid, is that true, though, that the UK does not know what it wants?
Well, parts of our debate in the UK really have got to a ridiculous stage where almost people are saying, we have a union, it's called the United Kingdom. If you want to join that, then all you have to do is ask to join the pound and swear allegiance to the Queen. You know, parts of the debate have become so ridiculous. But on the serious side of it, I have no doubt we will get a deal between the European Union and Theresa May. But can we get that deal through the House of Commons in the United Kingdom? That is the golden question. At this moment in time, there is no majority for any form of deal to be put to the House of Commons, and neither is there a majority in the House of Commons for a no-deal scenario either.
So the answer is no to your question. The answer is no. So we're back to square one, actually.
Well, ultimately, at the second hurdle, we could find that whatever deal is agreed here in Brussels, it actually falls in London.
Exactly.
That's a risk.
I completely agree. I think there's and now Theresa May is also with this proposal to just get a longer transition is actually getting in even bigger danger, because people now in London, all the Brexiteers, kind of want to get rid of her, as they keep saying every few weeks. But still, now she's in danger, and there's this deal that's not even done, that may even never pass Parliament.
Yeah, with all of this, we saw some leaders, you know, they're preparing for a no-deal Brexit. There's a lot of talk about whether or not that would actually take place, but there are preparations going on. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said yesterday that it is, of course, part of being responsible and forward-looking governance that we prepare for all scenarios. That includes a possibility that Britain will leave the EU without a deal. It's reportedly her first time actually acknowledging that. And France has published a draft bill in the case of a no deal. British citizens would have to present visas to enter French territory and hold residence permits to stay. And they could not hold jobs restricted to EU nationals. They would also have limited access to healthcare and welfare. I mean, that is pretty specific and pretty hard, actually, putting that on the table. Is this really something that is envisioned, or do you think it's a negotiating tactic? Putting pressure?
No, I think it's a negotiating tactics now. You are all the time raising the stakes, and like I said, it's like a poker game. You increase and increase into the pot all the time, but eventually there will be a deal here. But before they actually have a deal on the table, I don't think we will see it here in the different interviews with the different leaderships.
But Pauline, let's look at it from the French point of view. If there is no deal, wouldn't they benefit from it by trying to win? You know, there's some analysts who would say that they could try to win some of the business that would probably leave the UK and benefit from it.
Right. Well, I think there's obviously some part of like business and finance that Macron's being very open to try and call to France. Like he's called for entrepreneurs to come to France. It's not new that he would want to try and get some benefit from it.
The EU leaders will sit down tonight to dinner, but Theresa May won't be there. And as has been widely reported, she's not invited to that dinner. And strangely enough, it's not the first time that food has threatened to overshadow these negotiations. Let's take a look. They called it the Pizza Summit. Members of May's cabinet met for a pizza party on Monday evening. And while May was not there, concerns over her Brexit strategy were definitely on the menu. It's not the first time food has taken center stage.
As you mentioned briefly, the dinner you had with Mrs. May. Publicly, it was a good dinner. Privately, I heard it wasn't quite so good. And do you expect...
You mean the quality of the food, or...? Privately, everything went well, but in fact, we have a problem. because the British want to leave the European Union, and it's not feasible. But it was excellent. I'm not talking about the food.
Or what about when a Brexit-dominated summit made Angela Merkel hungry for a famed Brussels fruit shop? Or when Council President Donald Tusk posted this photo of Theresa May and a not-so-subtle caption, "Sorry, no cherries." What is this with the obsession with food? Anybody want to comment on that?
Food is important.
You're from Modena. It's the center of gastronomy in Italy. That's how we come together. That's how we make connections and relationships.
No, food, absolutely.
And not
right.
being
You're so
invited
right.
to dinner, you know, it's such a big deal.
Food
Here, it says a lot, right?
Food brings people together.
But do we care what they eat? I don't care what they eat. It's about what they're talking about.
That's the real
not what's on
sad
the
thing
table.
about where the UK is right now. The UK is literally not at the table, not part of the family.
Well, there you go.
That's a tragedy.
Traditional parties in the EU are doing some serious reflecting today after voters sent a clear message over the weekend that in Germany, Luxembourg and Belgium, those traditional parties suffered major losses and erosion of support as voters turned to the fringes. The biggest shake-up was in Bavaria, where preliminary results showed that the ruling Christian Social Union won the most votes but lost its absolute majority. For only the third time since the Second World War, it will have to share power. The far-right anti-immigration Alternative for German party is projected to enter state parliament for the first time, while the Green Party were the real success story, more than doubling its support to become the second largest political force in southern Germany. This afternoon, we heard from Angela Merkel, who struck a conciliatory tone, declaring that lessons have to be learned. Let's have a listen.
Und deshalb ist meine Lehre aus dem gestrigen Tag, dass ich auch als Bundeskanzlerin dieser großen Koalition stärker dafür Sorge tragen muss, dass dieses Vertrauen da ist und damit auch die Resultate unserer Arbeit sichtbar werden. Und das werde ich auch mit allem Nachdruck tun.
Angela Merkel speaking a little earlier on. Brian, let's start with you. Just kind of sum up what we take away from this election. The result was expected, but it's still pretty big news, isn't it?
It's big news if you look at what's happened in terms of individual parties. But when you look at left-right blocs, not much changed. When you add together the numbers in terms of who shifted where, there really is very little movement there. And this is going to be very interesting for the European elections as well, because we do expect that no one party is going to dominate next time. But Bavaria teaches us that there's a lot of coalition building still to be done.
There is one party, though, that's taken a very significant hit, the SDP. Why?
It's difficult to say, but what we can say is that there is a risk factor within this government. This is clearly the CSU. From the beginning on, they tried to do their own policy, to do their own issues, and that was mainly linked to the election yesterday in Bavarian elections. And we know that the CSU is everything doing for these kind of regional elections every 5 years, and that's the reason why I'm telling that this is a risk factor. And now this risk factor, they brought it so far with the disputes in the last month, in particular of this, we call it Bundesverfassungsschutz, the protection of the Constitution, the chief of this authority. And this was, I guess, one more important instance for the problem.
There are definitely internal pressures and disputes within the SDP in Bavaria, but that's not to say that obviously this is also part of a wider trend that we've seen where the SDP essentially getting hammered.
Yes, I don't want to say that this is the only reason for our failure. To be honest, we have a lack of credibility for a long time now, and this is directly dealing and linked to the Grand Coalition issues. And as we might remember, 1 year ago we had the big question to answer: should we go once again into the Grand Coalition or not? And we asked the members, and they said with 67%, "Oh, let's go." So that makes our life really difficult.
Being the junior partner in government isn't necessarily always good. But let's have a look. Let's take a closer look at those results from last night's election. This is according to preliminary polls that the CSU, it still topped that poll. It won 37.2% of the vote, but that was down massively, 10 percentage points from the last election. Now, it could form a coalition with the Conservative Free Voters. They're predicted to take 11.6%. Support surged for non-traditional parties, as we've been saying. The Greens are predicted to win, 17.5%, and the AfD 10.5%, knocking over that 10% figure. We should say the SDP polled less than 10% of the result. We've just heard from Angela Merkel, talked about making a conciliatory noises. What's the damage for her and for her governing party in Berlin?
Well, time will tell. I mean, she's definitely taking a calm and collective stance, as we saw her speak there. That's always the way Angela Merkel goes. And a real litmus test, of course, for her will be on the 28th of October, when we see the Hessen state elections. That's, of course, the economic powerhouse of Germany, where Frankfurt is based, and all eyes will be on those elections, of course, to see what happens then. Bavarian elections were, of course, huge for the last 4 or 5 decades. We've seen her sister party do extremely well, but this result has just showed that people just are not voting for the moderate, regular politicians anymore, if you like. They're looking for...
And we look at what? We look at Luxembourg over the weekend. This is a general trend where particularly the centre-left is not performing at all. I mean, it's almost, you could say, the collapse of the centre-left right across Europe.
The centre-left has copied other people to follow on migration. It's pitched here, it's pitched there. It's lost credibility, like you just heard. And some Greens I spoke with today from Germany, they said they were mopping up socialist votes because they have no credibility left. They said that this was an election about what they called Haltung, probably mispronounced, but ethics and principles. CSU lost on ethics and principles, and they said that the socialists just seemed irrelevant in this. I don't know if that can continue, though.
Is this in some ways quite good for Angela Merkel, though, in the sense that it means that her arguments about tacking to the right, which some would say the CSU did, has not worked?
Yeah, if you look at it from that perspective, yes. But we have to look generally when it comes to democracy. I think it's not a good sign and a good signal when we look around and the democratic parties are losing because of these kind of things. We are also faced with these migration issues. But the main problem is when you allow that we have the modes for the last 10, 12 years, always crisis mode. The people, they had the crisis on Greece, they had the crisis on the budget of the nation.
While domestically doing quite well, though. You know, the economy's doing well,
but
crime is down.
If you look from that perspective, you are right. It's far more difficult to justify, to explain, because the people, if you look around, they have never earned so much money as now. The situation we have in Bavaria, for example, we have 2.8 unemployment. That does mean this is nearly full employment. So this is really a schizophrenic situation. But as you said before, we as social democrats all over the European Union, we have to create ourselves in a new way. We have to come with different political offers. For example, a European industry policy, which is none of the parties are doing so far.
Lots of world leaders are in Brussels this week, including the Russian Prime Minister. He is set to meet Germany's Angela Merkel and the EU's Jean-Claude Juncker on the sidelines of the Asia-Europe meeting. Yesterday, I spoke to Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev in Moscow in a wide-ranging exclusive interview for Euronews' Global Conversation, and he was quite vocal about what he calls anti-Russian hysteria and the futility of sanctions. But he was much more muted when it came to this Skripal affair. Here's a sneak peek.
Текущая ситуация во взаимоотношениях между Россией и Европейским Союзом, ну, что скрывать, эти отношения переживают не лучшие времена. Мы считаем, что это результат тех достаточно скоропалительных решений, которые были приняты самим Европейским Союзом. И, как мне кажется, расплачиваются за эти решения, еще раз подчеркиваю, не мы были их инициаторами, те, кто живет в Европейском Союзе. Естественно, это оказывает негативное влияние и на нашу страну.
I'm sure you've been asked this many times, the Skripal poisoning. The defense given by the two suspects were mocked. Are you embarrassed by that reaction? Do you think it damaged Russia's credibility?
Понимаете, вообще любые оценки такого порядка, они точно не способствуют международному сотрудничеству. Я вспоминаю советский период, когда Советский Союз тоже вешал ярлыки клеймил международную систему капитала, говорил о том, значит, что нас разделяет. Но ни к чему хорошему это не вело. Мы еще сегодня не говорили про наших друзей за океаном, например, про вот эту антироссийскую истерию, которая существует в Соединенных Штатах Америки. Мы же прекрасно понимаем, что все, что связано с Россией сейчас в Соединенных Штатах Америки, преследует другую цель. Это внутриполитические разборки. По сути, разборки между республиканцами и демократами, разборки внутри республиканской партии. То же самое, я почему об этом говорю, касается европейских стран. Значит, вот эта антироссийская кампания, она в 90% из 100 преследует абсолютно внутриполитические цели. Сохраниться у власти, сформировать правительство, добиться еще каких-то результатов, но уж точно не, так сказать, повлиять на позицию России. На нее повлиять невозможно, все это прекрасно понимают.
I want to really ask you about the defense given by the Skripal suspects, just because I want to know whether you really believe that they went there to see a cathedral.
Я не знаю, я комментировать не буду, просто потому что я не знаком ни с этими людьми, ни с этими комментариями в достаточной степени не знаком. Я не знаю, откуда я знаю.
Okay, so does Russia see itself at war with America or anyone who imposes sanctions on the country?
Санкции абсолютно непродуктивная история. Санкции в отношении банковского сектора – это действительно объявление торговой войны, это наиболее тяжелые санкции. Нет никаких сомнений, что мы подобного рода давление сможем преодолеть. У нас нет никаких сомнений, что наша экономика способна адаптироваться к любым формам давления. Вопрос только в том, зачем это надо. Вопрос именно в том, что это разрушает международный порядок, в том числе международный экономический порядок. Степень интегрированности, взаимововлеченности российской и американской экономики очень незначительная. От того, что американцы объявляют санкции в отношении, допустим, нашей страны, американский бизнес не очень сильно страдает. Именно потому, что у нас небольшой объем торгового оборота. Но европейский бизнес страдает очень сильно, потому что у нас огромный объем торгового оборота. Торговый оборот с Соединенными Штатами Америки приблизительно сейчас, это плохой период, около 20 миллиардов долларов. Это ничто. 45% нашего торгового оборота приходится на Европейский Союз. Это сотни миллиардов евро. Возникает вопрос, что на этом потеряла Европа? А потеряла она рабочие места, потеряла она прибыль, потеряла уверенность.
Is Donald Trump the best thing that happened to Russia in recent times?
Ну, Дональда Трампа не мы выбирали. Его, с одной стороны, подозревают в каких-то симпатиях к нашей стране, хотя, собственно говоря, он ничего с точки зрения такого радикального улучшения отношений между нашими странами пока не сделал.
All right, let's discuss what he actually said. He said a lot in that clip. Is there, maybe I'll start with you, is that the view in Russia? Is there anti-Russian hysteria? You're living here in Europe, you see what the Europeans see as Russia doing and seen as Russian aggression. Is there anti-Russia hysteria?
I think the Russian media is reporting anti-Russia hysteria with a bit of excitement, because it means for them that Russia is treated as a really powerful, big, almost superpower. Even if it's America, it means that we are on the same level with the States. So in a way, it boosts their pride. In the same way that, Russia is obsessed with celebrating victory in the Second World War, because, look, we beat Germans themselves, so we're really powerful. So again, I think they're suffering from a loss of prestige as a superpower, as the Soviet Union, and now they're back on the stage, on the front row. So in a way, they're happy to report that. Although, of course, it hurts their pride as well, because I said, no, we haven't done enough to deserve this bad treatment.
All right. One thing that how Europe has been responding is through sanctions. So sanctions, Dmitry Medvedev was saying that regardless of how many sanctions are imposed, it won't change the position of Russia. So it's useless.
Well, let me say first that the Russian people are our friends. We reach out to them. It's a great nation, a great people. The problem is in the Kremlin. And it's the Russian people that are the first one to suffer of this regime. If the sanctions are so futile and terrible as the Prime Minister says, they could start by lifting the sanctions that Russia is imposing to Europe, because these are the sanctions that are hitting our company, not the ones that we put. We have soft powers in the European Union. We are not a military superpower. It's our economic power. And it's a way to tell the Russian Kremlin, come back to the international community, come back to us. You're a member of the United Nations, member of the G8, respect international law. But the aggression against Donbass and Luhansk in Ukraine, with involvement of Russian military, the annexation of Crimea, an integral part of Ukraine. These are facts. So, you know, here we have this propaganda machinery where I'm sorry that the Prime Minister is part of defying and attacking Europe. On the other side, you have with Skripal, with Ukraine and so on, hard facts. With the fake news, with the attacks against our election. This is evidence that we have that Russia is acting in a way that is hostile to the European Union, dividing us, destabilizing us, and trying to disunite us. Yeah, and of course, sanctions is the minimum we can do.
When I presented all those, you know, that Europe is accusing Russia of, and with the evidence that the Europe intelligence services have, he said, I'm not going to Brussels to meet my counterparts to be judged. We are not here to be judged. So what does that say about
No, we're not judging, we're defending us from attacks.
Right, I mean, that's, from him saying that and coming here, what's the potential then to move forward?
Well, in his own words, there's no potential because Russia can't be influenced. So what do you do in that situation? You have to stick to your own values. The Prime Minister spoke about the importance of international cooperation, but that has to be grounded in something. That has to be grounded in values, not in invading neighboring countries, not in setting up troll farms to disrupt other people's elections, not in murdering the civilians of other countries. And he talked about costs. Well, what is the relative cost? Yes, there's a cost to sanctions, but it's a much greater cost if a country feels that it's going to be invaded or any such invasion would actually occur
so obviously,
on European territory.
This is viewed differently in Russia, obviously, that none of this is accepted.
No, sanctions work both ways because they're targeted at oligarchs, at strategic sectors of the economy. Exactly. But when they're not supposed to hurt ordinary people in Europe or in Russia. But when
they
Medvedev,
are, aren't they?
Yes, but when Medvedev talk about them hurting people, he talks about Russian counter-sanctions, the embargo, in particular, embargo on food imports.
Exactly.
You know, I've just been to Russia and I met cheesemakers, and they produce their own Parmigiani, and they're so proud. They said, we're busting sanctions. But in a way, they're busting counter-sanctions.
Right. That is very important.
But that means that this stimulates the Russian economy in a very bizarre way because they have produce their own. The same with financial sanctions. Russians are worried to keep their accounts abroad, so they repatriate the capital, which is good for the economy.
So it's very important to tell to the Italian people, for instance, because you mentioned Parmesan, I come from a family that produced Parmesan cheese, that it is the sanctions imposed by Russia that are hitting Italian producers, not the European sanctions.
Judging from a video making the rounds on social media, the 2019 European election campaign is off to an aggressive start. Released by the office of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, the campaign-style ad takes direct aim at Guy Verhofstadt, but it may not be 100% accurate. Alex Morgan and his team at The Cube have been looking into this. Alex, what have you found out?
So, Darren, yes, this is the video which accuses Guy Verhofstadt of being reckless. Now, it also says we must protect Europe, and that Hungary, in the statement that accompanies it, does not want to become an immigrant country. So, pretty strong claims focused in on the MEP Guy Verhofstadt. And let's just show you the video being released in the English language on social media.
Verhofstadt. He wants more migration.
We need migration.
These are the facts. 1.8 million migrants have entered the European Union since 2015. Millions more wish to come. Since the crisis began, hundreds have lost their lives in vicious attacks all across Europe. Violent crime is rising, and Guy Verhofstadt wants more migration.
We need migration.
This is reckless. Time to shake up Brussels. Let's protect Europe.
Let's protect Europe. Time to shake up Brussels. And that's quite a short clip you might have noticed there from Guy Verhofstadt. Sounds a bit clipped, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. And let me just show you why. That clip from Guy Verhofstadt comes from this video from 2014, in which Guy Verhofstadt is giving an interview answering the question, is immigration good or bad for Europe? It was part of his candidacy to be Commission president. He actually said, the full sentence he said was this. He says, we need migration. And then he goes on to say, but we need legal migration. For the moment, we have the opposite. We have illegal migration. and human trafficking. The actual point Guy Verhofstadt was making was the need for the European Union to reform its immigration policies to tackle illegal migration. So simply cutting "we need migration" without the rest of this clip, that is misleading, and that is what this video does. Let's just bring up something else from the video. You'll see a number of these images from the horrific, barbaric terrorist attacks across Europe. This video, however, clearly links these attacks to Europe's migration policy since 2015. And the important thing here is that is a gross oversimplification. Attacks like the Bataclan, where indeed many of those attackers were either Belgian or French nationals, and Charlie Hebdo, where those terrorists were radicalized and raised in Paris. To simply link these attacks to immigration policy since 2015, again, is misleading. So let me just bring up that central claim. These are the facts. Well, this video does not present the facts. It misleads people by showing a short clip of Guy Verhofstadt. And look, if I'm going to give my analysis, Darren, on this, this doesn't serve anybody. There is clearly an important discussion to be had in Europe about integration, about assimilation, about radicalization. But videos like this, which don't present the actual situation, that doesn't serve left or right, anti or pro, because at the end of the day, it's easy for critics to dismiss this and shut down the discussion. But in this case, I think many people on both sides would see this video as simply being a piece of political propaganda.
Problematic and unfair. That's how EU Justice Commissioner Vera Jourova describes golden passports. Her comments come as the OECD blacklisted 21 countries over the schemes offering nationality at a price. The report flagged 3 European countries, Malta, Monaco and Cyprus. The Maltese program is particularly popular because it's an EU member. But a report by Transparency International and Global Witness says the problem is more widespread. It names Spain, Hungary, Latvia, Portugal and the UK, and says each has granted high numbers of golden passports or visas. As for the money earned, since their schemes began, Spain, Cyprus, Portugal and the UK have each received hundreds of millions of euros on average every year. I mean, this is something we know as journalists, when there's big money involved, the danger increases. So tell us about in Malta, this situation with golden passports. How big really is the network and the problem?
One of the problems is that we don't know. There's absolutely zero transparency. The Maltese government set out right from the beginning to make the scheme as opaque as possible because they understood that this is the selling point. The more opaque it is, the more it protects and obscures the criminal actions of the people who buy passports, the more attractive it is. And the more they're going to sell. We had to fight for even the tiny amount of transparency we have now.
Who is fighting? Who is putting pressure on the government to be less opaque in Malta?
It was my mother. She was the only person. She was the only person investigating the scheme.
So the Maltese people don't care?
I mean, people in general find the scheme unacceptable, but because Malta doesn't have a strong democracy and doesn't have a strong democratic culture, my mother was left alone. Other journalists were slow to understand the scheme, slow to investigate it. It was only my mother, really.
But it was not just because of Malta, because it was also a problem at the European level. I have been here in the European Parliament since 2013, demanding indeed action by the Commission on the golden visa schemes, because they are a big threat to our security. They are immoral because, you know, at the same time that they are allowing migrants to sink in the Mediterranean, they are given golden pathways to reach migrants, some of them criminals, kleptocrats, who use our jurisdictions to launder money and to eventually even launch all sorts of criminal action. And the Commission was totally oblivious of that until now, finally, and I pay tribute to Commissioner Vera Jourova, who is now undertaking an investigation and is taking measures also because she understood with the case of Malta and what Daphne exposed, not just on golden visas, but also how this interlinks with all sorts of corruption and of even criminal organizations organizing this.
We did hear the warning from security services here in Europe about the dangers. Transparency International, you've done investigations into this.
Our report shows that this is not a marginal phenomenon, as mentioned in the documentary, but also it exposes, like it highlights the risks that these schemes expose the member state, but the EU as a whole. And one of them is the problem of letting some corrupt people in because little checks, little controls are made
But
on
per se,
applicants.
is it a problem per se? Because there is a financial incentive, and if you argue from the financial point of view, that
drugs
there
will
could
bring
be
you
benefit.
financial results.
So you don't see any benefit to this?
No, of course not. I mean, Europe is supposed to be a union of sophisticated economies, not economies that make their money from pumping oil out of the ground and sitting back doing nothing. This is not what we pride ourselves on.
President Donald Trump, he's had a lot to say about Europe last night, and not much of it was flattering. The US president gave a wide-ranging interview to CBS's 60 Minutes. He talked about trade tensions with Europe, NATO, and Russia's alleged poisoning of a former spy. Let's have a look.
Nobody treats us much worse than the European Union. The European Union was formed in order to take advantage of us on trade. And that's what they've done.
But this is hostile.
And yet it's not hostile.
It sounds hostile.
You know what's hostile? The way they treat us. I like NATO. NATO's fine. But you know what? We shouldn't be paying almost the entire cost of NATO to protect Europe. And then on top of that, they take advantage of us on trade. I will always be there with NATO, but they have to pay their way. I'm fully in favor of NATO, but I don't want to be taken advantage of.
Do you agree that Vladimir Putin is involved in assassinations, in poisonings?
Probably he is, yeah, probably. I mean, I don't... Probably, but I rely on them. It's not in our country.
Okay.
So, guys, what I find interesting about this is that Donald Trump is at least consistent. He said exactly the same thing for the last couple of years, but he has not been president for 2 years. Let's look at this. On Europe and trade, they essentially got a deal. On NATO, he's still funding it. And on Russia, he has actually slapped on some sanctions. So what's he achieving?
He's achieving being president until he's either impeached or jailed.
No, but on the issues, what isn't it just rhetoric? Isn't that all we're hearing?
Well, I think what's very concerning is that the rhetoric is quite so inflammatory. And, there are lots of flip-flops. And I think there probably is quite a team of people around him trying to ensure some consistency because, he's almost a parody of himself now, that it almost washes over you like this kind of wave of noise and then, we'll actually wait and see what's going to happen. But I still don't think I feel very comfortable with Donald Trump as president.
Do you think that at any point, Maeve, there's going to be a point where the public will turn around and say, we've heard all this before, actually, in the grand scheme of things, nothing has really changed?
Well, very possibly. I mean, he's been repeating the same mantra, as you say. He's been very repetitive. He's very unpolitically correct, which is strange for us because we're used to so much political correctness. But on foreign affairs and international relations, Donald Trump can really say what he wants because at the end of the day, his voters don't actually care about foreign affairs. It's more things and feeling like there's money in their pockets is why they voted for him.
Dubbed Brexit by some, it was this photo that captured Europe's attention this morning. The French and German leaders showing a united front at Le Roi d'Espagne bar in Brussels' famous Grand Place. Also present was Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel and Luxembourg's Xavier Bettel. But as the pair prepare for a no-deal Brexit, was it just an innocent way to relax after tough talks or a public show of solidarity in the face of a Brexit stalemate? One thing certain, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki wasn't there. He was spotted in Place Jourdain. Nor was Theresa May, who missed out on last night's dinner as well. Okay, was that a PR move?
Yeah.
Yes, very clearly. What was the message?
Definitely, nothing happens here without being planned. So that is clearly a PR move they are doing to show that they are a team, like they are strong together. Of course, it was a PR move.
Or that, okay, we can't reach a deal, let's just go out for drinks. And,
it may have been a bit of that as well. Maybe they were like, oh, finally, we're free now, let's go for a beer.
Who are they talking to? Who are they showing this to?
Well, there's a difference between going for a beer just around the Commission and going for a beer on the Grand Place, and the famous Grand Place in Brussels. Right. So obviously that was the PR move. It was, we know we're going to be photographed, we know we're going to be seen together, and we might as well enjoy it.
Are they talking to the British people? Are they talking to the British government? Who are they talking to? What do you think?
To everyone.
Well, I think they had multiple audiences, I have no shadow of a doubt. And actually part of the audience was one another, telling one another that we are absolutely united and don't anybody dare try and move away from this position.
Let's go to tonight's raw moment. There's been a lot of complicated Brexit talk, as you know, recently. But here's one German satirical show explaining the single market. Let's take a look.
Ist ja nicht übertrieben. Hier, Engländer, die Tante Angela erklärt euch das nochmal wie sehr, sehr doofen Kindern.
Aber es gibt eben auch ein paar Maßstäbe. Und einer dieser Maßstäbe ist, dass man nicht zum Binnenmarkt gehören kann, wenn man nicht Teil des Binnenmarktes ist.
Ja, genau, Engländer. Nur wenn man im Binnenmarkt ist, ist man im Binnenmarkt. Kapiert? Got it? Komm, ich mach's noch einfacher. Guck mal, das hier ist meine neue Boris Johnson Sockenpuppe. Ne? Guck mal. So. Und das hier ist die EU. Ja? Jetzt ist der Boris drinnen, draußen. Drinnen, draußen.
German satire. How was that received there?
I thought it was funny. It wasn't raw. It was funny.
And you quite like this. You quite like that Boris was a star of this satire in the very beginning of the show.
I love a huge number of things about this, and particularly Germans taking the mickey out of an Englishman like me. I mean, you know, that's a new concept as well. You know, Germans with a sense of humour. And my German friends and family and colleagues will forgive me for saying that.
That was the week that was. Join us again next week on Monday. We'll be live from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. See you then.